I had a question from the ego point of view. How do you know you're on the right track? Is that a way to know?
Yeah, you start wanting less. So the question is, here you are, you're doing karma yoga, you're doing jnana yoga, you're engaging in inquiry, you're on the spiritual path, you're doing your devotional worship. From the ego's point of view, how do you know you're making any progress? We were just talking about this yesterday. It's great. Yeah. In fact, great question, actually. It's a good lead-in for the day. You want less. And you want less because you realize you need less. You're the fount of joy. That's your true nature. So you don't need these things to make you joyous. That doesn't mean everything's going to drop away and you're sitting in your loincloth like Ramana. It just means you're going to see that you're not dependent on things for your happiness. You don't need circumstances a certain way. You'll still work to meet your needs, and you'll still try to meet your needs in alignment with your preferences. But when it doesn't work out, you're not going to be all sad, depressed, angry, etc. Jealous of other people, what they have. Okay? So that's how you can tell. To whatever degree you're still bothered by circumstances. And again, it's a subtle understanding. And only you can really be the judge of it, because you're still always going to be a human being. Which is what I want to talk about next. And this is what came up, Catherine and I were talking in the afternoon yesterday about this. You're never going to transcend being the human. Okay? And so you're going to have, little irritations and things like that. But a little irritation is different than suffering. And so, again, only you can be the judge of it. But, how much do these things bother you? Somebody cuts you off in traffic. If you're like, God, it kind of irritates you for 5 seconds and you let it go. And you're not racing after the person flipping the bird, and stuff like that, then you're probably okay. The American namaste, as I was taught yesterday, I guess. Anyway, so you'll still have those, those little irritations and things, but am I internally rocked? Is my boat rocked? Then, if it's not, then you can start to tell, oh, I'm getting free of that stuff. Which brings up another thing. So, as I said yesterday, there's a part, or there's a way to look at gaining self-knowledge as the jiva getting free. Okay, so if we're looking at it from that perspective, you're less agitated by things and less dependent on circumstances and having certain objects and experiences. But then, of course, on another level, or the even subtler understanding, is that you're not the jiva at all. So liberation is for the jiva in one way, because it's the mind that registers what you already are. The mind just doesn't understand that you're already free. You don't have to be caught up in all this drama. But we're so conditioned to be caught up in it that we think that's what we just do without thinking. Once we realize, then we can still move through the drama, but we're just not caught up in it. So that's for the mind, you might say. So the mind got enlightened or gained self-knowledge. But when the mind gains self-knowledge, the mind realizes that its true nature has nothing to do with the mind. The mind isn't, that the body-mind-sense complex as a whole, everything below the myline, isn't who I am. And so you're free from the jiva. Okay, so it can be, for the jiva, and then it can be from the jiva. And then the ego likes to hijack that somewhere in the middle and say, when I get enlightened, then I'm the enlightened jiva, and then, we get all the trouble of brewing. Because then I'm so cool, or I'm better than other people, or if I don't always live up to everything, and if I have an irritation here or there, then suddenly my identity is threatened. Well, your true identity can't be threatened. It really doesn't matter what's arising. There comes a point where it doesn't matter what's coming up in your mind. The thought, I'm not self-realized, can come up in your mind, and you just go, oh, it's a thought. I remember when I thought that thought meant something. It becomes, there comes a point in which your thoughts are just tools, to navigate through the world, right? Because we have to think, we have to make decisions, but they're not real entities in and of themselves. They're not, or they don't define who you are. Is this a good tool for me to use or not? So you start chucking the tools out that aren't good, You're a big stupid idiot. Well, that doesn't really work too well. So chuck that one out. Okay, I can make the right decision in this case. Use my discrimination. Okay, use that thought. Works better. And then realize that actually the one wielding the thoughts, although it's not a doer and not a wielder, is you. Stepping back for a moment, going back to this idea of you're not going to escape the jiva. This is an important point to contemplate. We have these spiritual ideals. I mean, we've brought up Ramana at, various times in this seminar. We've talked about, I've made reference to Nisargadatta. There's, we've mentioned Muktananda. We've mentioned, a whole bunch of different gurus, and I'm sure there's a vast array of them, among our crowd here that, we've all encountered and know about. And they're put up on these pedestals as these ideals. And we know some of them have been sort of shot down and they're corrupt, but others, it would seem like Ramana was pretty pure. There's not much you can say. I mean, that guy wasn't out, chasing the ladies and trying to, pad the coffer or anything with money. I mean, he seemed to be legit. Same with Nisargadatta, So, but what we do is we hold these icons up, or these idealizations, or Christ or the Buddha, or whoever else it might be. Who knew the Buddha? I mean, how do we know? And even if I think most of the scriptures that are attributed to or in Buddhism came after his time. I'm not sure. I think maybe there are some in his words, but I think they were recorded after his time. So how do we know? And especially with the Bible, I know there are some, apparently some law scriptures that are actually, but there was the whole Council of Nicaea, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, who, sort of decided this is how we're going to present Christ to the public, or whatever. So how do we know we're getting a true picture of this guy? But we hold this ideal up and then we try to live up to it. And even if you just look at the array of people who have been held up as ideals, I mean, again, just to use the two examples, of Ramana and Nisargadatta, could you get more diametrically opposed people? I mean, Ramana is the guy who just leaves society, sits in a loincloth in a cave and does nothing. Nisargadatta is a businessman in the midst of the Mumbai ghetto, smoking cigarettes and selling cigarettes. Making a living, eating meat, of all things. So, okay, now which one is a truer picture of what realization is? Well, there isn't really a true picture of what realization is. But here's the thing. Rather than always looking to the ideals outside, the true litmus test is what's going on inside. You don't have to look outside, because really, who cares what happened with Christ, or who cares what happened with the Buddha? I mean, they're great, they might offer some inspiration or that type of thing, but big deal. Unless you're happy and unless you're free, what does all this amount to? Chuck Vedanta out the window if you're not, finding any peace or happiness from it. It's a tool. It's a pretty darn good one. But I mean, look inside. Am I freer? Am I happier? Am I more peaceful? Not am I more like Ramana? Am I more like Ramji? Just look inside yourself. Again, the role models are good to have and they serve as inspiration and they can, give us some guidance. It is great to see someone walking the talk. Like I said, I can just look at pictures of Ramana and there's some, there is just some like energy to that or something. You just get a sense of what his being is. Now, I'm not going to be going back to Minnesota, trying to be Ramana, but something about those pictures informs my being. That's instructive too. You can look in those eyes and just, oh, yeah. But what it boils down to is your own inner you are not an experience, but you see an acknowledgement of your state through an experience, that reflection in your being. So you can kind of tell by the reflection, am I calmer? Am I,